Today, we're diving into one of the most captivating stories in the Bible, the story of Daniel and the lion's den. But have you ever wondered how Daniel's unwavering faith led him to survive such a terrifying ordeal? What made him so confident in God's protection? This isn't just a tale of survival, it's a powerful testimony of how one man's courage inspired kings, transformed empires, and continues to echo through history. From interpreting dreams to facing the fiery furnace, Daniel's journey was filled with miracles, dangers, and divine revelations. Throughout this video, we'll uncover the incredible moments that defined Daniel's life. Moments that demonstrate God's sovereignty and the impact of standing firm in faith, even when faced with impossible odds. We'll also explore the mysterious visions that revealed the rise and fall of empires, the coming of the Messiah, and God's ultimate plan for humanity. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a story that has inspired believers for generations and shows us the power of faith under pressure. If you like this type of video, leave a like so that it can reach more people and help support the channel. God bless you. Daniel was just a young teenager when he was taken captive from his home in Judah to serve in the foreign land of Babylon. But why did God allow such a tragedy to happen to his people? The answer lies in Israel's disobedience and rejection of God's commands. Despite this, Daniel chose to remain faithful, even in the midst of a land filled with idolatry and temptations. Unlike many others who succumbed to Babylon's culture, Daniel and his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, stood firm in their beliefs, refusing to defile themselves with the king's food and wine. But how did they have the courage to make such a decision? Daniel and his friends knew that eating food offered to idols would compromise their loyalty to God. They were aware that Babylon's influence wasn't just political, it was spiritual. Their refusal to eat the king's delicacies wasn't an act of rebellion, but a declaration that their trust and dependence were on God alone. Through prayer and faith, they requested permission to eat only vegetables and water, trusting that God would sustain them. The result, after 10 days, they appeared healthier and more robust than those who indulged in the king's provisions. This small victory set the stage for God to elevate them to positions of influence. Their wisdom and knowledge soon caught the attention of King Nebuchadnezzar. When he interviewed them, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the other young men. But why did God bless them so abundantly? Because they remained faithful to him in even the smallest matters. Daniel's journey of faith began with these small, seemingly insignificant decisions. This foundation of trust in God would prepare him for greater challenges, ones that would impact entire kingdoms and alter the course of history. The young captive's unwavering faith led to positions of honor, but it also brought jealousy and opposition. It wasn't long before their faith was put to the test in a far more dramatic way. As we move forward, we'll see how their courage in the face of death turned the hearts of kings and demonstrated the power of the true God of Israel. King Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful ruler of his time, yet even he wasn't beyond God's reach. One night, he had a disturbing dream that left him troubled and anxious. But here's the catch, he couldn't remember the dream itself. Frustrated and desperate for answers, the king summoned all the wise men, magicians, and astrologers of Babylon. His command was simple but impossible. They had to tell him both the dream and its meaning. How could they do that? Without any clue about what the dream was, no one could satisfy the king's demands. This is where Daniel's story takes a pivotal turn. When Nebuchadnezzar threatened to execute all the wise men for failing his request, Daniel heard about the king's decree. Instead of panicking, he approached the king with confidence and asked for time to seek the answer from God. Why did he do this? Daniel knew that only God could reveal such mysteries. Gathering his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Daniel urged them to pray earnestly for God's mercy and revelation. Their lives depended on it. That night, God answered their prayers and revealed the dream and its meaning to Daniel in a vision. How did Daniel respond? He didn't rush to the king. First, he gave thanks and praise to God for his wisdom and power. With the revelation in hand, Daniel went before the king, calm and composed. "No wise man, enchanter or magician can tell the king his dream," he began, acknowledging the limits of human ability. "But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Daniel then described the dream in vivid detail: a massive statue with a head of gold, chest of silver, belly of bronze, legs of iron and feet of iron and clay. Then a stone, cut out without human hands, struck the statue, shattering it completely. The stone grew into a great mountain that filled the entire earth. Nebuchadnezzar was stunned. This was his dream. But what did it mean? Daniel explained that the statue represented successive kingdoms, starting with Babylon as the head of gold. Each metal symbolized a kingdom that would rise and fall until God's eternal kingdom, represented by the stone, would finally rule forever. Nebuchadnezzar's dream wasn't just a warning. It was a prophecy that laid out the future of human history. Why did God reveal this to a pagan king? Because even in the midst of Babylon's grandeur, God was showing Nebuchadnezzar and the world that he alone controlled the destiny of nations. The king was so overwhelmed by the accuracy of Daniel's interpretation that he bowed down and worshipped Daniel's God, declaring, "Truly, your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings." But how did this dream affect Daniel's life? It elevated him to a position of great honor, making him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief over all the wise men. Yet, this newfound power came with new challenges. As Daniel's influence grew, so did the jealousy of others. His ability to interpret the king's dream set him apart, but it also painted a target on his back. Little did Daniel know that this dream would be the first of many trials in which he would have to rely on God's wisdom to navigate the dangerous waters of royal politics. As we'll see next, Daniel's steadfast faith would inspire even greater acts of courage, not only from himself, but also from his friends, who would face a fiery test of their own. Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, faced one of the most dramatic tests of faith in the Old Testament. King Nebuchadnezzar, in a display of his power and arrogance, constructed a massive golden statue and commanded that everyone bow down and worship it. But what would happen to those who refused? The consequence was death by being thrown into a blazing furnace. For most people, fear would have compelled them to comply. But not these three young men. Why did they refuse? Because they knew that bowing to an idol would betray the God of Israel, whom they served with their whole hearts. When the decree was announced, they stood firm, refusing to bow, even as everyone else fell to their knees. Furious at their defiance, Nebuchadnezzar gave them one last chance to conform. But their answer was clear. "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up." Their words were a declaration of absolute faith in God's power and sovereignty. Whether he saved them or not, they would remain faithful. Nebuchadnezzar's face twisted in rage. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and his strongest soldiers bound the 3 young men and threw them into the fire. But what happened next stunned everyone. As the king looked on, he leapt to his feet in astonishment. "Didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire?" he asked. "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." How could this be? God himself had sent an angel to protect them. walking with them in the midst of the flames. The fire had no power over them, only the ropes that bound them were burned away. Nebuchadnezzar called them out of the furnace, and when they emerged, not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothes didn't even smell like smoke. This miraculous deliverance left the king speechless. In that moment, Nebuchadnezzar, the most powerful man in the world, praised the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, declaring that no other God could save like this. He issued a decree that anyone who spoke against the God of Israel would be punished severely, and he promoted the 3 young men to higher positions in the kingdom. Their courage and faith in God not only saved their lives, but also led an entire nation to recognize the power of their God. Their trial by fire set a precedent for the people of God. No matter how fierce the flames of persecution, God is with those who trust him. This story of courage and divine protection spread throughout Babylon, inspiring countless others to stand firm in their faith. Yet as we'll see, this was just the beginning. Daniel would soon face a test of his own, one that would take him into a den filled with hungry lions. As Daniel's influence grew, so did the envy of his peers. Under the reign of King Darius, Daniel was appointed as one of the top 3 administrators over the kingdom. His exceptional qualities and integrity made him stand out so much that the king planned to set him over the entire empire, but this favor drew the jealousy and resentment of other officials who conspired to bring him down. However, they couldn't find any fault in him. Daniel was faithful, trustworthy, and above reproach, so they devised a sinister plan. If they couldn't find any wrongdoing in his work, they would trap him through his devotion to God. The officials knew that Daniel prayed to God 3 times a day, no matter what. So they approached King Darius with flattery and deceit, suggesting a decree that would forbid anyone from praying to any god or human except the king for 30 days. Anyone who violated this decree would be thrown into the den of lions. Why did they choose such a drastic punishment? Because they wanted to ensure that Daniel would have no way out. Without realizing their true intentions, King Darius signed the decree, making it irrevocable according to the law of the Medes and Persians. When Daniel heard about the decree, he didn't panic or try to hide his faith. He went to his upper room, opened his windows towards Jerusalem, and prayed as he had always done. He wasn't trying to defy the king, he was simply honoring God above all. But the conspirators were waiting. They immediately went to the king and reported Daniel's actions. Darius was devastated. He valued Daniel and realized he had been tricked, but there was nothing he could do to change the decree. With a heavy heart, he ordered that Daniel be thrown into the lion's den, saying, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own ring. That night, Darius couldn't eat or sleep, anxiously waiting for the dawn. At first light, he rushed to the den and called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" To his amazement, Daniel's voice echoed back, clear and strong. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, O king." Darius was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted out of the den. Not a single scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in God. In an act of divine justice, the conspirators who had plotted against Daniel were thrown into the lion's den, where they met the fate they had intended for him. This miraculous deliverance led King Darius to issue a decree throughout the land, praising the God of Daniel as the living God whose kingdom will never be destroyed. The story of Daniel in the lion's den is one of the most iconic narratives in the Bible, illustrating God's protection and the power of faith. When Daniel was thrown into the den, surrounded by ferocious lions, it seemed like there was no hope. The den was dark, and the air was filled with the low growls of the hungry beasts. Yet, as Daniel prayed, an angel of the Lord appeared, closing the mouths of the lions. But why did God allow Daniel to be thrown into the den in the first place? To demonstrate that his power is greater than any decree of man, and that those who trust in him are never alone, even in the darkest of places. King Darius, who had been deceived into signing the decree, spent a sleepless night worrying about Daniel. At dawn, he hurried to the den, his heart pounding with fear and hope. To his immense relief, Daniel answered, testifying that God had sent an angel to protect him. Not a single wound was found on me, for I have done no wrong before God or you, O king, he declared. This miraculous event not only saved Daniel's life, but also served as a powerful witness to Darius and the entire kingdom of God's might and faithfulness. The conspirators, who had plotted against Daniel, met a swift and tragic end. They were thrown into the same den, but unlike Daniel, they were immediately overpowered by the lions. This dramatic reversal of fortune showed that God's justice cannot be thwarted. King Darius, now a witness to the living power of God, issued a decree that everyone in his realm should revere the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed, and his dominion will never end, the king proclaimed. But how did this experience shape Daniel's life going forward? The lion's den was not the end of Daniel's trials, but a confirmation of his faith and God's favor. He continued to serve with wisdom and integrity, trusted by the king and respected by his peers. This deliverance didn't just rescue one man, it transformed the heart of a king and affirmed God's sovereignty to an entire nation. Daniel's example of courage and trust in God would echo through the ages, becoming a source of inspiration for countless believers facing persecution and adversity. But Daniel's story doesn't end here. His life of prayer and devotion positioned him to receive some of the most profound prophetic visions ever recorded. God wasn't done revealing his plans through Daniel. The next visions would not only unveil the future of earthly kingdoms, but also provide a glimpse into the spiritual battles that shape our world. After surviving the lion's den, Daniel received a series of visions that revealed the fate of nations and the coming of God's eternal kingdom. These visions, recorded in chapters 7 through 12 of the book of Daniel, are rich in symbolism and detail, presenting a timeline of events that span from Daniel's day to the end of time. But why did God choose to reveal such profound prophecies to Daniel? Because Daniel was a man of unwavering faith, whose heart was fully devoted to understanding God's will. His desire to see God's people restored led to the unveiling of these mysteries. The first vision, given during the reign of Belshazzar, depicted 4 great beasts rising from the sea, each representing a powerful kingdom. The fourth beast, more terrifying than the others, had 10 horns, symbolizing 10 kings, and a little horn that grew up and spoke boastful words against God. This little horn, a representation of the Antichrist, would wage war against the saints and seek to change times and laws. But the Ancient of Days, the eternal God, would judge this beast, and his kingdom would prevail. This vision showed Daniel that earthly empires, no matter how powerful, are temporary, and God's kingdom will ultimately triumph. Another vision described a ram and a goat, symbolizing the Medo-Persian and Greek empires. The goat's large horn, representing Alexander the Great, was broken and replaced by 4 smaller horns, foretelling the division of his empire after his death. Out of one of these horns came a small horn that grew in power, foreshadowing Antiochus IV Epiphanes, who would desecrate the temple and persecute the Jews. Why reveal such specific details to Daniel? To show that God knew the future in advance, and that his people could trust him, even when faced with seemingly overwhelming opposition. As Daniel pondered these visions, he was deeply troubled. He fasted and prayed, seeking to understand their meaning. In response, the angel Gabriel appeared and explained that these events were part of a greater timeline, one that included the coming of the Messiah and the establishment of an everlasting kingdom. Gabriel's revelations gave Daniel insight into the rise and fall of empires, the persecution of God's people, and the ultimate victory of God's anointed one. But there was more. Daniel was about to receive a final vision that would clarify everything. This last vision, given to Daniel in his old age, would be the most detailed and comprehensive. It would span centuries, revealing the rise of the Antichrist, the Great Tribulation, and the final restoration of God's people. As we move forward, we'll see how this vision connected all the prophecies together, providing a complete picture of God's plan for humanity. One of Daniel's most profound visions involved a prophetic timeline that revealed the future of Israel and the coming of the Messiah. This vision occurred while Daniel was praying and confessing the sins of his people. The angel Gabriel appeared to him and shared a message about 70 weeks, determined for the Jewish people and their holy city. But what did these 70 weeks represent? Gabriel explained that each week symbolized 7 years, making the entire period 490 years. This timeline was broken into 3 parts: 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 final week. Each segment marked significant events in Israel's history and the arrival of God's anointed one, the Messiah. Why was this vision important for Daniel and the Jewish people? They were in captivity, longing for the restoration of their nation. This prophecy gave them hope by providing a roadmap of what was to come. Gabriel explained that from the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the arrival of the Messiah would be 69 weeks, or 483 years. And just as prophesied, Jerusalem was rebuilt, and years later, Jesus Christ entered the scene, fulfilling the prophecy as the Messiah. But Gabriel didn't stop there. He revealed that after the 62 weeks, the Messiah would be cut off, and the city would once again face destruction. This was a clear prediction of Jesus' crucifixion and the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70 after Christ's birth. But what about the final week? The last 7 years are known as the time of the Great Tribulation. This is when an evil ruler, referred to as the prince who is to come, will make a covenant with many for 1 week, but then break it halfway through. Who is this ruler? Many believe he will be the Antichrist, a figure who will deceive the nations and bring great suffering. Gabriel's message to Daniel was a warning. Tough times would come, but they wouldn't last forever. The end of the 70 weeks will mark the final triumph of God's kingdom over all earthly powers. This prophecy connects directly to the end times, revealing that God has a precise plan for history. In the latter days of Daniel's life, he received a final vision that would reveal the most comprehensive view of God's plan for humanity. This vision didn't just concern Israel. It unfolded the future of nations and the spiritual warfare behind world events. The vision began with Daniel standing by the Tigris River. Suddenly, he saw a heavenly figure, clothed in linen with a belt of pure gold, and a voice like the sound of a multitude. Overwhelmed by the sight, Daniel fell face down. Why did God choose this moment to give Daniel such a vision? It was because Daniel had been faithfully seeking answers for his people's future, even in his old age. The heavenly messenger revealed a detailed prophecy of future conflicts between the kings of the north and south, representing the rulers of the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires. But this wasn't just a history lesson. The angel's words pointed to a future ruler who would exalt himself above every god, desecrate the temple, and bring great suffering upon God's people. This was a direct prophecy about the Antichrist, who would rise during the end times. Why did Daniel need to see this? Because he needed to understand that history wasn't just a series of random events. Everything was under God's control, working towards a final confrontation between good and evil. The vision then moved beyond earthly kingdoms to a dramatic climax, the final battle between the forces of heaven and hell. Daniel saw Michael, the great prince and protector of Israel, standing up to defend God's people. But this wasn't a battle that would end quickly. A time of unparalleled distress was coming, a time so severe that it would threaten the very survival of God's people. But there was hope. The angel declared that everyone whose name was found written in the book would be delivered. This wasn't just physical deliverance, but eternal salvation. Why reveal such intense details? It was to assure Daniel and future generations that God's people would be preserved even in the darkest of times. The vision continued with a promise of resurrection. The dead would rise, some to everlasting life and others to shame and everlasting contempt. This was one of the earliest and clearest revelations of the resurrection in the Old Testament. It pointed to a future hope that goes beyond earthly suffering, eternal life for those who are faithful to God. But Daniel's vision didn't end there. He was given a mysterious timeline of 1,290 days and 1,335 days, signaling the duration of the final tribulation and the blessing of those who endure. Why these specific numbers? While their full meaning remains a mystery, they indicate that God has a precise plan, down to the very last day. As the vision concluded, the angel told Daniel to seal up the words of the prophecy until the time of the end. Daniel was left with more questions than answers, but he was also given a promise. Go your way till the end. You will rest, and then at the end of the days, you will rise to receive your allotted inheritance. This final promise assured Daniel that his faithfulness would be rewarded in the resurrection. His life of devotion and courage had secured his place in God's eternal kingdom. And as we move to the conclusion, we'll reflect on the legacy of Daniel, a man whose faith and visions continue to inspire and guide us even today. Daniel's final visions revealed a conflict far greater than any earthly battle. He saw the struggle between good and evil playing out in the spiritual realm, a war between angels and demonic forces. But why would God show Daniel such intense imagery? Because he wanted to pull back the curtain and reveal that every conflict on earth has a corresponding battle in heaven. Daniel witnessed the archangel Michael, the protector of Israel, standing against powerful spiritual entities like the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece. These weren't mere symbols, they were actual demonic rulers influencing nations and stirring up chaos. This revelation changed Daniel's understanding of history and its spiritual roots. The angel explained that the forces of darkness sought to undermine God's plans by manipulating the actions of kings and empires. Why did these evil spirits care so much about human affairs? Because they knew that Israel, God's chosen people, played a pivotal role in his plan of redemption. If they could disrupt the course of history, they hoped to derail God's promises. Yet, even in the midst of this cosmic struggle, Daniel saw that God's angels were actively engaged in protecting and guiding his people. This battle wasn't just happening back then. It continues to this day. Spiritual warfare is still real, and our prayers play a crucial role in it, just as Daniel's did. Daniel's encounter with the angel highlighted a vital truth. When we pray, we're not just talking to God. We're participating in a battle that affects both the physical and spiritual realms. Why did it take 21 days for the angel to reach Daniel? Because the Prince of Persia resisted him until Michael intervened. This delay showed Daniel that persistence in prayer is crucial. It wasn't that God didn't hear him, he heard from the very first day. But spiritual opposition tried to prevent the answer from reaching Daniel. This reality teaches us that when we feel like our prayers aren't being answered, there may be unseen battles we're not aware of. This vision also pointed forward to a time when the forces of darkness would rally under a single leader, the Antichrist. Daniel saw this evil figure rising, speaking against the Most High and oppressing God's people, but he also saw that his power would be limited. After a period of great suffering, the Antichrist would be judged and his dominion destroyed forever. Why did God reveal this? To show that no matter how powerful evil seems, it has an expiration date. God's kingdom, however, is eternal and unshakable. Daniel's vision was a message of hope. Even in the midst of chaos and persecution, God is still in control, and his people will be victorious in the end. Daniel's visions of the spiritual battle between good and evil provide insight into why history unfolds the way it does. They remind us that we're not alone in our struggles. Just as angels fought for Israel, they fight for us today. And just as Daniel was called to stand firm in his faith, we are called to do the same. The spiritual battle is ongoing, but God's promise of victory is sure. As we continue to explore Daniel's revelations, we'll see how these visions connect to the final restoration of God's people and the establishment of his everlasting kingdom. As Daniel's visions came to a close, he was shown a glimpse of God's final plan, a kingdom that would last forever, filled with peace, justice, and righteousness. After witnessing the rise and fall of earthly empires, the persecution of God's people, and the struggle between spiritual forces, this vision was a beacon of hope. But why was this vision necessary? Because it reminded Daniel and all believers that no matter how dark the world may seem, God's ultimate plan is one of restoration. The temporary triumphs of evil will be overshadowed by the eternal glory of God's kingdom. Daniel saw that the saints of the Most High would receive this kingdom and reign forever. This kingdom wasn't just an abstract idea, it was a real, tangible promise. Daniel's vision described it as a time when God himself would rule over all nations, and his people would dwell in safety. But what sets this kingdom apart from others? Unlike earthly kingdoms, which are built on power and often crumble under corruption, God's kingdom is founded on truth, love, and holiness. There will be no more suffering or injustice. For those who endured trials, it's a promise that all pain and loss will be redeemed. Why did God reveal this to Daniel? To encourage him and future generations to hold on to their faith, knowing that everything they've faced has a purpose. This vision also highlighted the role of the Son of Man, a figure who would come with the clouds of heaven and be given dominion over all people. Who is this Son of Man? Jesus Christ himself, who referred to this title during his ministry on earth. Daniel's vision was a prophecy of the Messiah's ultimate victory and his eternal reign. But how could Daniel, living centuries before Christ, comprehend the depth of this revelation? He understood that this kingdom was far beyond his time, and his role was to record it faithfully for those who would come after him. This vision provided a complete picture of God's plan, from the creation of Israel to the establishment of his kingdom on earth. Daniel was also shown a future resurrection, where those who were faithful would rise to everlasting life, while those who rejected God would face everlasting contempt. This prophecy was groundbreaking. It revealed that life doesn't end with death. For those who remained steadfast, there was the hope of eternal life with God. But why mention the resurrection here? Because it was the ultimate promise that evil and death would be defeated forever. The enemies of God might rise in power, but they would be judged and brought low. The faithful, however, would be raised up, shining like stars in God's kingdom. Daniel's final vision brought together all the themes he had seen throughout his life: the sovereignty of God, the struggle between good and evil, the hope of deliverance, and the promise of restoration. It was a fitting end to a life marked by faithfulness and revelation. And as we approach the conclusion, we'll reflect on Daniel's legacy, a man who remained true to God through trials and visions, and whose prophecies continue to guide and inspire believers to this day. The story of Daniel is more than just a historical account. It's a testament to faith, courage, and the power of unwavering trust in God. From being taken as a young captive to Babylon, to interpreting the dreams of kings and standing firm in the lion's den, Daniel's life reflects a man who refused to compromise his beliefs, no matter the cost. But what made Daniel so different? It wasn't his position or intelligence, it was his devotion to God in every circumstance. He lived through some of the most turbulent times in Israel's history, yet he remained a pillar of hope and integrity, inspiring generations of believers. Daniel's courage wasn't just about facing physical danger, it was about spiritual endurance. When he prayed openly, despite the threat of death, it wasn't an act of rebellion, but a demonstration of his unshakable faith. His strength came from knowing that God was greater than any earthly king, and that same faith empowered him to interpret visions that spanned centuries, revealing the rise and fall of empires and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. But why does Daniel's story still matter today? Because it shows that no matter how dark the world becomes, God's light shines even brighter through those who remain true to him. His visions weren't just for his time, they were prophecies that still speak to us, revealing God's plan for humanity and the spiritual battles that shape our world. They remind us that there's more to history than what we see. Behind every event is a divine purpose, and behind every struggle is the promise of redemption. Daniel's life is a call to stand firm in our faith, to trust in God's timing, and to be willing to follow him, even when it's not easy. His example encourages us to look beyond the trials of today and see the bigger picture of God's eternal plan. As we reflect on Daniel's journey, it's clear that his greatest legacy is his faithfulness. He didn't seek power or recognition. He sought to honor God, even in the face of persecution. His story shows us that true greatness comes not from what we achieve, but from who we become in the process of trusting God. Daniel's life and prophecies are a roadmap for navigating our own spiritual journeys, teaching us to pray with perseverance, act with integrity, and hold fast to our beliefs, no matter what challenges we face. The legacy of Daniel is a legacy of hope. It's a reminder that God is sovereign over all things, that he hears our prayers, and that he will ultimately establish his kingdom. And so, as we conclude this journey through Daniel's life and visions, may we be inspired to live with the same faith, courage, and trust in God that defined Daniel's extraordinary life. Daniel's life is a vivid illustration of what it means to have unshakable faith, even in the face of overwhelming odds. From the lion's den to the prophetic visions, his journey was marked by courage, wisdom, and a deep trust in God's sovereignty. But what about you? Are you facing situations that challenge your faith or seem impossible to overcome? Just as Daniel stood firm in his beliefs, you can draw strength from his example. The God who closed the mouths of lions is the same God who walks with you today, guiding and protecting you through every trial. As we reflect on Daniel's story, think about how his unwavering faith can inspire you to face your own challenges with courage and confidence. Do you believe that God has a plan for you, even when circumstances seem hopeless? Are you willing to stand firm, trusting that he is in control, just as Daniel did? If this story has encouraged you, consider applying its lessons in your own life, whether it's through persistent prayer, acting with integrity, or choosing faith over fear. If you want to continue learning from stories like Daniel's, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. This way, you won't miss any future content that delves deeper into the wisdom and guidance found in God's Word. Share this video with friends and family who could benefit from these timeless lessons. Let's spread the hope and inspiration found in the Bible together. What are your thoughts? How does Daniel's example resonate with your own journey? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and may God's grace be with you.